reports are divided into sections. These sections will generally match the sections you find in your timesheets. Each user has his own report configurations. These are usually report configurations that you have created yourself and plan to reuse. Administrators can also share report configurations with other users who have access to the report generator.
To generate and view reports, you have two options. The first is by using the See in the web browser button, which allows you to view the results directly in the browser. The second is the Download an Excel file button, which generates the same data, but in an Excel file, in order to keep it or to manipulate the data. Please note that cells representing totals do not contain formulas but simply the value.
To create a new report configuration, you must select the New Configuration option. A report configuration consists of two main sections. We first have the filter criteria, followed by the data presentation.
The filter criteria are used to define the data to include or exclude from the report. If you do not select any filter criteria, this means that all of the data will be included, even if you have been using FDT Pro for several years. In any case, the data is already filtered based on your access rights. Even in the case of a shared report, the access rights of the user who generates the report are applied, so the results could differ from one user to another.
Let's look at the list of fields that can be filtered. You will find a timesheet status filter, since by default, all timesheets, whether submitted or not, approved or not, will be included. If you want to strictly include timesheets that have a specific status, you need to add a filter. You will find a user status filter, since all of the data of all users, whether active or not, will be included, unless you add a specific filter.
You will then have several filters relating to the time period covered by the report. It can be weeks, payroll runs, days, months, or years. You can also define ranges for this type of filter. Choose the start of the range, then add a second filter to indicate the end of the range. You can also specify a relative period, such as the current or previous period.
You will then find the drop-down lists that you have in your system, particularly in the timesheet. For example, customer, project, activity, or billing. The filters are specific to your organization and to the report section you are in. You could also exclude data by using a negative filter. Filters can also be applied on fields that contain text, such as the comment fields. At this point, you must indicate whether you want to search for a particular word, or whether you want the entire comment to match a specific value.
Finally, it is also possible to filter users. This can be done through a predefined group of users. Otherwise, directly by specifying which user, or users, you want to include. It is indeed possible to have many similar filters. In that case, they will be combined to include the different specified options. The more filters you apply, the more focused and specific your report becomes. However, if you apply too many filters, you could end up with an empty report.
So far, we have specified the data we want to include in our report. That is, a certain time frame, a specific client, and 3 employees. We have also excluded an activity. Let's now explore the presentation of the data. You can generate different types of reports. Let's start with the table report type.
To obtain a table, you need to specify what you want to appear on each line. For example, let's select Activity. For some fields, additional columns can be added, such as an activity code in this case. Let's now see the result. You obtain 1 row per activity, with the activity code column, including only the data that meets the specified filter criteria.
It is also possible to add a second dimension to your report, by specifying what you want to see in each column. For example, you could indicate that you want 1 column per project. We now get this table with a breakdown in 2 dimensions, meaning 1 line per activity, and 1 column per project. You could also have interchanged the columns and rows, in order to obtain a report like this one.
An interactive version of the table is also available. This version allows you to further customize. You can move the columns, sort them, filter or perform searches. You can also select the columns to display. And finally, you can export the data in different formats.
If you need to add a third dimension in order to group your data, it is possible to use a multiple tables type of report. This type allows the addition of another dimension. For example, you could request to generate a table per user, each including one row per project and one column per activity. You would then get the following results. If you are generating a multiple tables report, in the Excel format, the file will contain a tab for each table.
The detailed entry listing is the other main family of report types. So far, we have seen the table type of reports. These group the data but do not display the full detail or some fields, such as the comments field. In order to see a field such as comments, you need a detailed entry listing type of report. In this example, we still use the same filters, but this time, we will get the full details. We now see dates and comments.
It is possible to choose the columns to display. You can remove or add columns as needed, like this. It is also possible to add subtotals or sort the data. For example, you can sort the data by user, or group it by project, or any of these criteria. Still with the same filters, we now obtain a grouping by project, with a subtotal. If you are only interested in the subtotals, we recommend that you use a table type of report. You will then obtain the same values, without having all of the details.
It is possible to add a second sorting criterion, and to request a subtotal at this second level. We then obtain, in this example, a total for each combination of activities and projects. An interactive version of the detailed entry listing is also available. In this case, you can customize further by sorting the columns, moving the columns as you wish, or even performing searches in the columns. You can again select the columns to display. And finally, export the data to different formats.
Graphs are the last type of reports available. Let's take the example of a bar chart. You need to specify for which variable you want bars for. For example, 1 bar per activity. We get this chart. Still applying the filters shown here. You can add a second level, so you could also separate by user. In this example, we now get 1 bar per user, per activity.
You can also create lines. In the case of lines, you could ask to see the evolution of the number of hours per week. Like this. Or you could create a series of lines, requesting 1 line per user. You also have the option to create stacked bars, which will look like this. And finally, you can generate a sector or pie chart and specify the variable you want to demonstrate in each section of the pie.
We have generated many reports, without yet saving our configurations. If the report is to your liking, and you plan to reuse the same configuration, you can give it a name, and save it so that it gets added to your list of reports. You will then be able to use it again. To this point, we have only generated reports for the worked hours section. Let's move on to another section. For example, the expenses and traveling section.
The principles remain the same from section to section. However, the available filters and grouping criteria may vary, such as in this case, where we have expense types, rather than activities. We can then filter the types of expenses. Another feature that differs from the worked hours section is that for the table type of reports, we have several metrics, while we only had hours in the worked hours section.
In this case, if you choose several metrics, when making a table, you will not be allowed to choose what you want in each column, since the columns are already taken by the various metrics. This will result in a table like this, with multiple metrics in the columns. If you wish to split the columns differently, you must then choose a single metric. The choice of columns will then be unlocked, and you will be able to choose a breakdown with another criterion at the column level.
Finally, let's take a look at the summary section. In the summary section, you will have a smaller selection of filter criteria, since there are no fields such as projects or activities. The reports in the summary section are often used for payroll processing.
You can therefore generate a table of this type, which will normally give you all the necessary details for payroll processing. In this example, if you want to get the details for each of the weeks, rather than a table, you can choose a detailed entry listing, with a subtotal per user. Here is what you obtain in this case. You have the total of the payroll run, in addition to the details of each of the 2 weeks.